Satan wants us to stay out of politics because he's in politics. Right?
Certainly evil men want good men to stay out of politics.
Right.
That's what they're counting on.
Right. So if we don't bring our faith into politics, then what we say is we'll leave that playing field, which has so much influence in human affairs, we'll leave that to Satan.
So, Mark, most of us have never heard of Convention of States. That's not an organization that you created. That's something in the Constitution of the United States, specifically in the 5th article of the U.S. Constitution. Explain it to us.
Yeah, so in the 5th article, it describes the ways that we have to amend the Constitution. The first way is when 2/3 of both houses of Congress decide to propose an amendment. It goes out to the states for ratification, 3/4 of the states. There's a second way that we've never used. All our amendments, 27, come from the first way. The second way is when 2/3 of the states decide to get together in convention. They pass resolutions in their state legislature. It takes 34 states, and they can gather in convention and propose amendments, just like Congress can at any time. And then those amendments go out for ratification by the same way. It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify. So that's the process specified in the Constitution.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of information. So, first of all, why would we ever want to amend the Constitution? The Constitution is a great document. It's one of the most precious freedom documents that we have today. Why would we ever want to amend it?
Well, unfortunately, especially over the last 115 years, the courts have essentially amended our Constitution hundreds of times. If you look at what they've done, there are thousands of pages of court cases that came out of the Supreme Court telling us what this beautiful little document means. And there are things in there that really don't make any sense. And the only way that we have to push back against that when the court does things that you or I or the majority of people don't believe in is to call a convention, propose amendments, and tell them, no, we're going to go back to something more like the original Constitution.
So normally, the federal government has to come together and agree to make a change to the Constitution, to outlaw certain things, or whether we're talking about slavery or other kinds of things like the Bill of Rights, making sure that we have that freedom of speech, that freedom of religion. But the Convention of States, it's kind of the last line of defense.
Correct.
If the government turns tyrannical, then they're going to make amendments that serve themselves and might injure the people, right? So talk about what happened that created that Article 5 Convention of States option. How did that come about?
Yeah, I think this is really important. 2 days before the end of convention in 1787, Colonel George Mason stands up. He's from Virginia, and he says, we've made a big mistake. We gave the power to Congress to propose amendments, but we didn't give it to the people acting through the states. And then he asked a question. He said, are we so naive that we believe that a federal government that becomes a tyranny would ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny? Now, I think they laughed, actually, because, of course, tyrants don't restrain themselves. That's never happened. We kind of know they did because we have Madison's notes, which say 2 Latin abbreviations, nin com, which means no comment. There's no debate about this. And in fact, then what they do is they unanimously adopt the second provision of Article 5 that allows us in the states to route around a tyrannical federal government and propose amendments to restrain federal tyranny.
So essentially, the people within the states can say, the federal government has turned into a monster, and so we are going to get together as the people, and it takes a lot of us to do this because it's not easy to do. It's kind of the nuclear option. It's
right.
The last-ditch effort to restrain evil, and we're going to get together and amend the Constitution specifically for the purpose of what?
Restraining federal tyranny.
Holding back the beast
right.
of an out-of-control government. Okay, do you think that we're really there in our country where we need to bring on a convention of states to amend the Constitution to limit the power of the government?
I think we're absolutely there. And I think the results speak for themselves when we look. You know, if you can go all the way back, I'm kind of an old guy, go all the way back to President Reagan. When he was elected, he promised to shrink the federal government, put Bill Bennett in charge of the Department of Education, promised to do away with the Department of Education. Now, I love Ronald Reagan. He's definitely a conservative icon, but the federal government was bigger when he left office. The Department of Education was bigger when Bill Bennett left the Department of Education than when they started. The beast is too big to restrain from within Washington, D.C. It has to be done by the people outside.
Some people might be watching this going, wow, you guys just got all political. Like this is, you know, you're faith guys.
Yep.
And if we get focused on politics, we're going to turn people away from Jesus. Are we out of our lane right now? by talking about political things and amending the Constitution?
You know, I think we're right in the heart of our lane. Right after I became a Christian, and I came late in life, I was 51, I'm 60 now, I went to Israel. We did a tour of Israel, the Holy Land, and we did it from a political and a faith perspective. And what you realize when you look at what happened when Jesus Christ came to earth, when God sent his only son to be sacrificed on earth, it was a very political time. And you had the entire world around the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus Christ came as the king, right? Not a traditional king, a new kind of kingdom, but it was very political. The Israelites said, oh, you're going to be our king, you're going to restore Israel. Well, not that kind of a king. But he created all sorts of political turmoil, and he actually was, in addition to being our savior, a very political figure at the time. So I think this is right where we belong. God expects us to express our faith in every arena, and I've not been able to find anything in Scripture in 9 years since I became a Christian saying, yeah, you shouldn't express your faith in the arena of politics.
Our faith should be like leaven that leavens through the entire lump of bread, of dough, right? That we don't want to divorce our faith from the way we use money, from the way that we love our children and our friends. We don't want to divorce faith from the public square. It needs to be there for it to have its heavenly influence.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I think Satan wants us to stay out of politics because he's in politics. Right?
Certainly evil men want good men to stay out of politics.
Right.
That's what they're counting on.
Right. So if we don't bring our faith into politics, then what we say is, we'll leave that playing field, which has so much influence in human affairs, we'll leave that to Satan.
So back to Convention of States. In order to call this meeting together of the people of the United States, you need 2/3 of all the states to agree to convene, to hold a convention. And then there's a very specific process laid out in the 5th article of the Constitution that says how many of the people in attendance need to agree to the amendment.
Yeah, that's correct.
And is it a lot? Like, is it easy to pass an amendment through this way?
I think it's very hard to get to convention. That takes 34 states. Right now, we have 18 states that have agreed to go to convention.
18 of our states have already agreed to do
so
this.
3 states literally just in the last month or so have agreed. That's the last states were Wisconsin, Nebraska, and West Virginia.
So you're not alone in thinking that this is serious enough to call a convention of states.
Yeah, we're well on the way. And then it takes a majority of states in convention, so 26 states, to say to the rest of the states, hey, here's a suggestion. We'd like you guys to consider ratifying it. And then it takes 38 states or 3/4 of states to actually ratify. It's not easy.
Has this ever been done before? Has a convention of states ever been called in the history of our country?
It has not.
It is not.
It's never been done before, which is one of the reasons I think it's so extraordinary to be doing it right now and to be living in this time when we need to and we have the opportunity to do this.
If the Convention of States happens and it's successful, how will that help the family of faith safeguard our First Amendment rights?
Yeah, I think the most important way is it'll get the federal government out of our business when it comes to the practice of our religion. You know, the states are generally speaking, not all, but generally speaking, much more friendly to faith. People are much more free to exercise their faith in the majority of states. And so it gets the government out of our way, generally speaking, not only in faith, but in all other areas. It also removes strife from the American body politic. And I think this is really important. One of the reasons we're so at each other's throats in America today is because we're different. New York is different than Texas, which is different than California. When we govern everybody from Washington, D.C., we force a one-size-fits-all on everybody. So we have to have those fights. They're important. If they're in all the states, we wouldn't be fighting that way. We're much closer to each other within a state than we are as a nation of states.
I can hear some people saying, but wait a second. If you amend the Constitution, you've just walked in, you've thrown open the door to the holy place. You can't change the heart and soul of America. And you could be opening a Pandora's box, and now all of a sudden, you could destroy the Constitution and unravel things in a way that you didn't intend. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, one, the founders disagreed with that. So I think that's really important. They put this in there for a purpose. They understood. They were very smart men who understood human history and human nature very well, and they knew this time would come. And number two is you have to understand the process, and this is really important. There's a lot of protections along the way, but the ultimate protection is just simple math. It takes 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of convention. A convention can only suggest. So whatever comes out of convention requires a supermajority, the highest bar in our entire system of governance. And I always ask folks like us, people of faith, well, if you're concerned about this, tell me the proposed amendment and then give me the 38 states that you think would ratify it. And I've been offering that to millions of people over the years, and I've never received a single email telling me what 38 states would ratify something that they don't like. I hear the Second Amendment, for example, all the time. We're going to lose our right to keep and bear arms. Well, today there are 23 states that have what's called constitutional carry without a permit. How do you get to 38 states ratifying something to take away our Second Amendment rights? It just can't be done by the numbers. All the convention calls for that we're working to call is anything that would impose term limits on the federal government. About 85% of people believe in that. Anything that would impose financial restrictions like a balanced budget amendment, again, that's an 85% issue. And then I think the most important thing, anything that would limit or reduce the scope and power of the federal government. So for you and I, that's things like telling them, no, you can't be involved in education. You can't be involved in healthcare. You can't be involved in the environment. These are things where the federal government was never meant to be involved, and we need to shrink it back down and put it in the constitutional box. So we're not really trying to change the Constitution so much as restore the original Constitution.
I think that that's really important, that that you're not trying to change the Constitution. You're trying to rein the government back in to line up with the original intent of the Constitution, which was never to take the responsibility to educate our kids away from us as parents. Tell us how that we're going to run our healthcare. That's something that we do ourselves. And tell us how to run our businesses and our churches. That's something that God's given for us to handle as individuals and as families.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Yeah. So how can people get involved in Convention of States?
You know, I think this is really important. You know, we talk about a lot of stuff in politics and in faith. And then the question is, what do we do, actually? Because talking is one thing, and it's good that we talk about it. What you do is people go to Convention of States, they send a petition, they click on the link, send a petition to their state legislatures.
And how do they go there?
Conventionofstates.com, and they click on the link to sign the petition, and then more importantly, click on the Take Action tab. Volunteer to be involved, and our folks are involved in a lot more than this. They're fighting for their faith, their freedom of religion in state legislatures, right to life, right to keep and bear arms. If you get involved, you're going to be involved in a family of people, primarily believers all across this country in all 50 states. Wherever you are, we need you involved. Today, over 5.2 million people are involved. They're at conventionofstates.com.
This is important. This is something that we need to learn more about. Convention of States is already, I believe, halfway there to getting 3/4 of the states in the union to agree to call a convention. This is real. This is happening. Mark, thanks so much for leading the charge on this and for helping to ensure that our freedom to worship God remains unfettered in America.